This is the moment where I try to capture your attention and give you a tease of the hot topics that we're about to talk about. And it's an important formatic on our show. I've been trying to figure out how exactly to break down all of the stories and what they have in common. And let me just leave it at this. If at the end of this show, CNN doesn't feel bruised, battered, and left on the side of the road, gasping for its last breath of air, I will not have done my job. Get ready. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. And really fast, I want to tell you about my book. It's all about the legacy media, the corporate media. There's a lot in here about CNN and all of the media lies and distortions and cover-ups that they engaged in during the 2024 presidential election. We're going to talk about quite a few of them, actually, in today's show. The book is called Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. It's my first book, and it's pretty damn good. I even got a big endorsement from Dr. Sebastian Gorka yesterday. I'm sure you saw it on the show. So go ahead and buy it. It's available in paperback, hardcover, and audiobook. Thank you very much. Jake Tapper is very, very, very upset. He's upset at CBS News. He's upset at the CBS network. This is interesting. You know, a lot of things happen with journalists and news reporters on other networks. Remember when Leslie Stahl recently on 60 Minutes suggested that maybe those hostages that were held by Hamas, you know, the Jewish and American hostages, maybe they weren't being starved, but maybe Hamas didn't have enough food. Remember when Leslie Stahl did that? Jake Tapper, who's usually pretty good on the Israel issue, he's Jewish himself, by the way, he wasn't so upset that he took any time on his show to call out Leslie Stahl when that happened. So you know it's a big deal when Jake Tapper decides to devote an entire segment to criticize one of his competitors, another network. In this case, it's CBS News, and it has to do with the resignation of the guy who ran 60 Minutes. Pop the popcorn and get ready for this one, because it doesn't end well for Jake Tapper.
The executive producer of CBS News 60 Minutes, Bill Owens, resigned today. Now, normally that would probably not be news that we would bring you, except the circumstances rise to the level of, well, alarm. Owens said in a letter to his staff that, quote, over the past months, it has become clear that I would not be allowed to run the show as I have always run it, to make independent decisions based on what was right for 60 Minutes, right for the audience, unquote. And the context here is key, because President Trump has been suing CBS News and its parent company, Paramount Global, for $20 billion for what the president calls, quote, unlawful and illegal behavior, unquote, though his accusations, according to legal experts, do not withstand scrutiny. This is what happened.
Can I just pause for a quick second there? Did you catch that? So the president is making these accusations, but those accusations do not stand up, according to legal experts, to scrutiny. Who are those legal experts? Do you have names for them? You're a journalist. Jake, remember, you're the only last serious journalist left. What legal experts? In fact, if you had a TV show, you could actually bring some of those legal experts on. We could see what their names are. We could see what their argument is. And then we could scrutinize them and their motives and their background. And, oh, you didn't do that. Oh, you do have a TV show. You could have done that. No. That's just a throwaway. It's a throwaway line that he uses to just say, just so you know, the lawsuit against 60 Minutes has no merit, because a legal expert that I'm not going to name told me so. Trust me, I'm Jake Tapper. By the end of this segment, you will not trust him because he's Jake Tapper.
Happened. Last fall, 60 Minutes interviewed Vice President Harris. President Trump declined the show's offer to sit down with them for an interview. During the Harris interview, 60 Minutes correspondent Bill Whitaker asked the then sitting vice president why Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not apparently listening to the Biden administration. Now, a preview of her answer ran in a preview clip on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday morning.
The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
The next day, however, 60 Minutes ran this answer when it ran the actual edited interview.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Now, CBS News explained the discrepancy, saying that they merely ran two different parts from the same longer answer, and under pressure, they revealed their transcript, and that is indeed what they did.
All right. Now, first of all, this is in my book, Shameless Liars. I've got a whole chapter on it. It's called 60 Minutes Runs Out of Time, because 60 Minutes has destroyed whatever credibility they may have had left. You know those clips because you saw it on this show during the events where it occurred. It was October of 2024, right before the election. Remember that. It was just weeks before the presidential election. That's relevant. I'll explain in just a moment. Those clips are also way more impactful when you see the way they edited it, because the question from Mr. Whitaker, the journalist there for 60 Minutes, the interviewer, was the exact same question. They had the exact same question, but 60 Minutes showed two different answers to two different audiences. It shows how deceptive it is. But Jake Tapper just said, well, it was just part of a longer question. It just got edited down. 60 Minutes claims they do it all the time. And of course, Jake Tapper is saying, yeah, we do that all the time too. We always edit interviews, and we make our editorial judgments so that the audience sees what we want them to see instead of seeing the whole truth. But then he gives an example. And if you're a keen-eyed viewer of this show, or if you know the media or politics, you know that the perfect example of this, the perfect example to show that 60 Minutes does this all the time, is the interview that Leslie Stahl had with Donald Trump 4 years earlier in 2020, where they edited his exchange with Leslie Stahl over the Russian collusion hoax and over the Hunter Biden laptop story. But what they did was they left really good stuff out. They edited it to make Trump look bad and to make Leslie Stahl look good. In this case, they edited it to make Kamala Harris look good. So that would be the perfect example. If Jake Tapper wants to show, hey, 60 Minutes does this all the time, that's what he would show next. But see, the problem with that is that would show that 60 Minutes does in fact do it all the time, but they do it all the time and use their judgment to make Trump or Republicans look bad and to make Kamala and Democrats look good. And so, yes, they edit all the time, but the through line here is not that they edit all the time. The through line is that they edit for political purposes. So now watch the example that Jake Tapper uses instead to prove that, you know, TV shows do this all the time.
As frankly happens all the time, including with President Trump's taped interviews. For instance, just for instance, in June of 2024, this ran on Fox.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Definitive, firm, yes, I would. But as Semaphore noted at the time, the full unedited version featured Trump sounding far less definitive.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you know, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
The president alleges that editing the 60 Minutes interview and running two different answers to the same question helped Vice President Harris and amounted to electoral fraud. In reality, this is just editorial discretion. Editors do it all the time with recorded interviews, including all the time with taped interviews and Donald Trump by Fox, all the time. And legal
all the time by Fox. So there's really a chance to get at Fox, I suppose. But you saw the two answers. First of all, how do we know those two answers? Because Fox Digital released the entire full interview themselves. 60 Minutes still has never released the full video of the Kamala Harris interview. They just released the transcript, and only under duress from the FCC. So pretty transparent there from Fox News when all is said and done, number one. Number two, that was in June, not weeks before the election, where the 60 Minutes Kamala Harris interview actually, through its deception, could make a difference in the outcome if anyone still watched 60 Minutes. And finally, you saw both answers. Is there really a substantive difference between the two? Other than leaving out the part where he said, well, you know, but there could be some, you know, and when he says fake stuff in the Epstein files, it means, listen, if there are fraudulent, defamatory allegations, and the Justice Department putting them out there, that could endanger somebody, right? Now, again, I'm not making excuses on the Epstein files. All I'm saying is that here's Donald Trump, for one sort of being a little circumspect and maybe being a little cautious just in case. And here's Tapper criticizing that. You see the difference. The only real apples to apples comparison, if you wanted to make one, would be 60 Minutes did this in an edited interview with Kamala and then this in an edited interview with Donald Trump. The only difference is 60 Minutes edited their interview to make Trump look bad and to make Kamala look good. And that proves the point of the lawsuit, especially considering it happened just weeks before the election. All right, let's go, Jake, because he's got a much bigger point to make here against CBS News, a network which I'm thinking Jake will never work for.
Experts, left, right, and center, say that this lawsuit in a court would certainly fail spectacularly. But Paramount Global, which owns CBS News, is currently trying to merge with Skydance Media. And in order to do so, they need the approval of the Trump administration, specifically the FCC. And under the FCC's brand new Trump-supporting commissioner, Brendan Carr, it has been suggested that Trump's news distortion allegations against 60 Minutes will be considered by the FCC before any merger is approved. Now, Sherry Redstone is the majority owner of Paramount, and she stands to make a fortune if this multi-billion-dollar deal, this merger goes through. And it seems as if Sherry Redstone is likely to bend the knee to Trump and settle this allegedly frivolous lawsuit. Now, Bill Owens, until today the head of 60 Minutes, rightly believes that 60 Minutes has nothing to apologize for. And that's what's going on. That's the context. Sure.
It's funny that he used the term bend the knee there in the context of President Trump. That's an editorial judgment to use terms like that instead of, I don't know, exercising sound fiduciary responsibility by settling this lawsuit rather than risking her shareholders' position with the company. Again, editorial judgments all around, but bend the knee is kind of a pejorative, isn't it? Also, here's an interesting bit of full disclosure that Jake Tapper doesn't include in that report, because right there, that was an attack on the Paramount Corporation that owns CBS News that's looking to do this merger, which would make them a very highly competitive mega media complex, right? So here's Jake Tapper on CNN using his platform, cloaked in the disguise of journalistic integrity, attacking Sherry Redstone and CBS News Corporation and their parent company Paramount over this impending merger deal that would make them a huge company. It would also make them a huge, huge behemoth competitor with Warner Brothers Discovery. Warner Brothers Discovery owns CNN. Oh, the integrity, Jake. Why didn't you disclose this? By the way, this network and my own behind is owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, which, if this merger goes through with Paramount and CBS, could actually put us at a competitive disadvantage, even though my reporting has already put us at a grave competitive disadvantage already. That would have been a great disclaimer there, Jake, Mr. Integrity, but you left that out. Jake, does the merger that CBS News and Paramount is about to engage in, will that negatively impact your company? If so, and the answer is yes, it is so, then doesn't that hold some relevance in this very important journalistic report that you're giving us? Let's let Jake finish up here.
Sherry Redstone had no comment when we reached out. President Trump, of course, has been trying to kneecap anyone providing oversight over his administration. He literally started his administration by firing a whole bunch of inspectors general. He is currently ignoring judges and courts. He and his MAGA forces intimidate the legislative branch from uttering even a peep of criticism. They're going after law firms.
I'm sorry. It's funny. I do an opinion-based streaming show here. You all know my opinion. You know my politics. I tell you who I vote for. I tell you what my opinions are. I'm an opinion journalist. Jake, however, Jake is a down-the-line, unbiased, completely impartial. He's just the fact, ma'am. I don't know. Do you know what party he belongs to? He would never tell you. Hey, Jake, who did you vote for? I don't disclose who I vote for. I'm pristine. I have journalistic integrity. Did you just hear how he characterized the Trump administration? What was the term he used there again?
Over his administration. He literally started his administration by firing a whole bunch of inspectors general. He is currently ignoring judges and courts. He and his MAGA forces intimidate the legislative branch from uttering even a peep of criticism.
MAGA forces? I'm sorry, do you have any evidence to back that up? Could you name a name? What exactly does that mean, MAGA forces? Does he have his own police squad or Secret Service? What is a MAGA forces? How does that make its way into your script, Mr. Just the Facts journalism? Maybe it's me as an opinion journalist here, but I smell it. I can tell when you're expressing your opinion and giving some rhetorical flourishes to inspire an emotional reaction. Furrow your brow more, Jake. I'm glad you got your smart guy glasses on. So do I. And I've got more.
They're going after law firms. They're going after universities. And this war against the Fourth Estate journalists is of this piece. Owens is not without his critics, of course, but this is not about one man or even about one show. It's about an attempt to be rid of criticism. The Pentagon has taken the offices of CNN and NBC and the New York Times and Politico and reassigned them to outlets that provide more flattering coverage, like Breitbart. The White House is doing the same with wire services. It's war against the Associated Press and bringing in folks like this one from last Friday.
Photos have emerged of Senator Van Hollen sipping what appears to be margaritas with Abrego Garcia down in El Salvador. Do you encourage other Democrats to fly down to El Salvador to meet with this illegal alien who's an accused wife beater?
I like this guy. See, now this is the kind of a reporter we like. There aren't enough of them.
That person, of course, that was asking that question was asking about a lie. Senator Chris Van Hollen says that those margaritas were never touched. They were.
Hold on. Did you see what just happened here? Did you? I'm sure you saw it. Jake Tapper, in characterizing the question about the photo op of Chris Van Hollen meeting with the MS-13 wife beater, the Maryland man, said this about the question.
That person, of course, that was asking that question was asking about a lie.
A lie. It's a lie. It's a lie that they were sipping margaritas. Well, I mean, I saw the picture. There are margaritas on the table, right? So it's a lie. Well, Jake, okay, what's your source? What's your source for the truth here to prove the lie? You just called a reporter a lie. You called his question a lie. You called the topic a lie. So I'm sure you're going to reveal your source. You saw this, right? What's the source?
Senator Chris Van Hollen says that those margaritas were never touched. They were set up on the table by somebody working for the president of El Salvador.
His source is Senator Chris Van Hollen. So it's a lie. How do you know it's a lie? Well, because Senator Van Hollen said so. That's your source? The guy who looks like the buffoon? The guy whose political career is shattered? If in fact he was sipping margaritas with this guy? That's your source? He's a better journalist than anyone, that Jake Tapper. I am breathlessly honored to even utter his name and share screen with such great journalism. Jake Tapper, forget about the Mount Rushmore of modern journalists. It's not a Mount Rushmore. It's just one man. It's David. It's Michelangelo's David. There's only room for one, and it's Jake. Hopefully he's wearing a loincloth.
Or to make a joke of this senator's meeting. Those margarita glasses were propaganda, and that's what that person asked about. And of course, that's the kind of reporter that the president likes, because that question was not the question of a reporter. And that is the context of Sherry Redstone's likely bending of the knee. Hope the money's worth it, Sherry.
Yeah, and Jake, I hope your stock options with Warner Brothers Discovery are worth it if you got a little bounce out of this, especially if you helped spike that merger. Boy, that would be great news for Warner Brothers. Why didn't you disclose that? Jake Tapper's real problem here is that the more these corporations who own media outlets end up settling lawsuits for defaming Donald Trump and lying about them, then the harder it is for Jake Tapper to do what you just saw him do, which is lie or call other people's liars because they've got a great source, Chris Van Hollen. See, he was very upset when ABC News settled with Donald Trump because George Stephanopoulos defamed him multiple times, calling him a convicted rapist, which he is not. Jake Tapper was not upset at George Stephanopoulos. Jake Tapper was not upset that journalism got a black eye because a high-profile journalist like George Stephanopoulos lied about a presidential candidate. No, he was upset that ABC News settled because it makes it harder for Jake to lie.
This press conference, because this weekend ABC News agreed to pay $16 million, including legal fees, to settle a defamation lawsuit brought by Trump against the network and their anchor, George Stephanopoulos. And that obviously will not be the end of this campaign against the media, legal campaign.
There's no campaign against the media. There's no legal campaign against the media. There's an American citizen defending himself from being defamed on the ABC News Disney platform when a absolute bona fide lie was told about him. We know it's a lie because in other programs, George Stephanopoulos actually had accurately reported the E. Jean Carroll suit and the jury's verdict. It was an absolute show of malice against Donald Trump, and George Stephanopoulos has plenty track record to prove that in court. I'm sorry that Trump settled for only $16 million. But I want to be fair to Jake Tapper because, after all, he is the last serious professional journalist in this town. And as already noted, he's way better than all of us. Just ask him. Let's remember how dogged he was when he had Democrats on his show all during the 2024 campaign, and they kept insisting that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack. Here it was in June. This was just a couple of weeks before that fateful debate where it all came crumbling down. The whole lie was exposed. But this was in the heyday when Jake and Karine Jean-Pierre and late night comedians were calling people like me propagandists who were pushing cheap fake videos that were manipulated to make Biden look like he was old and feeble and had lost it. Here's Jake Tapper pressing in to Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, who was the head of Biden's campaign. Look at how he goes after him on this issue.
What's your response to the article? Surely you acknowledge that any 81-year-old seems a little slower than he did at, say, 61 or 71. That's just the aging process.
Well, that's right, Jake. But frankly, this particular article, and I know both of the reporters well,
They're great reporters.
struck me as maybe this was an editorial choice, not including any of the clear and supportive and strong quotes that a whole series of us who are Democratic senators offered based on our recent experience with President Biden. But they did choose to quote three different Republicans, including Jim Risch, Republican senator, who gave very critical quotes. So, look, I frankly think it was misrepresentative. It was edited in a way that was designed to produce a particular result. I gave a long and detailed quote about some direct experiences I've had with the president recently, where he's shown mastery of the topic, where he's led a really compelling conversation in a bipartisan context, talking about the Israel-Gaza conflict.
What's your response?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, my gosh. I'm so sorry. I don't know. I didn't know what we just have an edited clip here. I'm sure the very next moment is Jake Tapper following up with hard-hitting challenge and question after question. Because here's Chris Coons saying that Joe Biden is on top of his game, that he leads conversations behind the scenes, that he's absolutely as sharp as he's ever been. And I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that we edited out Jake Tapper's follow-up question. This must be one of those cheap, fake, right-wing X accounts that just does this stuff to make Jake Tapper look bad. I'm sorry. Who presented this clip? Oh, this is awkward. It's awkward. That's CNN's Jake Tapper. That's his own show's X account. They're promoting that clip. Maybe Jake didn't follow up. Maybe Jake Tapper just sat there and allowed this partisan hack, Chris Coons, lie to his face. And if you caught it, at the same time, maligned those two Wall Street Journal reporters as editorializing instead of just reporting facts. Jake didn't let that happen. Didn't challenge that either, because he's the champion of journalism, damn it. So he sat there and let Chris Coons lie to all of us about how great Biden was. But Jake Tapper, he's worried about these lawsuits because he wants to be able to lie as much as he wants without threat of he or his parent company ever getting sued. Because Jake Tapper wants to pursue the truth. In fact, if you would like the truth about Joe Biden's decline and how it was all covered up and he was not fit to serve ever, and it was a complete and total charade. Jake Tapper wants you to buy his book that he's written about that topic. It's coming out next month. Jake Tapper wrote a book about Joe Biden's health and the cover-up. I mean, after all, he had a front row seat. You just saw him sitting right there in the front row. Jake Tapper's our last great journalist. I tell you what, if you really do want to know about the decline of Joe Biden and how the media and the Democrats covered him up, I got a better book for you. Buy mine. Oh, Jake, we may be done with you, but we're not done with CNN. We've got more coming up next. How about that, Kevin? I plugged my book a couple of times in the segment, and then I threw to commercial, teasing forward to my next segment. How great was that?
Genius. You're a pro.
See, he has an edge. Do you know his? Have you sensed his edge? I think Jake Tapper is going to feel that one. You know how everybody thinks that President Trump won the last election because he was so real and natural and authentic, and he went on podcasts, right? Well, not really. I mean, podcasts did serve the president quite well because it showed him in very good light. It showed him being natural and authentic, but he's natural and authentic no matter what the setting, frankly. No, the real power of the podcast is that he could go over the heads of the corporate media and go direct to you, the viewer or listener, in the democratized news streaming media that we have, where I don't need a corporation to tell me that I can start a show, and you don't need a corporation to tell you what content is best suited to your needs. And most of the podcasts he went on were live or live to tape without any edits. Think about it. Kamala Harris did a 40-minute interview for 60 Minutes that they cut into 20 minutes, and she still looked like a buffoon. Donald Trump did 3 uninterrupted hours with Joe Rogan, and you ate it up. And there was no editing, and he just was who he was. Well, the lesson Democrats should have gotten from that is, hey, we need to be more authentic. We can't keep bullshitting the voters and the American citizens. They see right through our lies. It's time to be real and tell it like it is. That should be the lesson for politicians, especially Democrats. Instead, the lesson they learned, I guess, was, oh, let's go on more podcasts. Come on, everybody, we're going to do podcasts. Ready to do a podcast? I'm going to do a podcast. Wait, I'm Gavin Newsom. I'm going to do one better. I'm going to start a podcast. Okay, but if you're still a phony fraud, it doesn't matter what platform you're on, you're still going to come across as a phony fraud. Let's cut then to Elizabeth Warren, who decided to go on a podcast. The one memo she didn't get was that most of us who host podcasts, we don't march in lockstep with the Dana Bashes and the Jake Tappers and the Rachel Maddows and the Kristen Welkers. We don't sound exactly the same. We don't read from teleprompters. We don't ask the exact same questions that fit right into your talking points. So she goes on this podcast, a liberal podcast, but she was asked a question she wasn't expecting, an obvious question. I guess that's why she wasn't expecting it, because on CBS or on ABC or on CNN, they never ask the obvious question. Watch what happened.
Saying that President Biden had a mental acuity. He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true.
And you think he was as sharp as you?
So wait, all right, you know what? I'll let it run and then we'll come back because I know I don't want to interrupt it because there's so much here. Go ahead. Let's just watch it all the way.
I said I had not seen decline. And I hadn't at that point.
You did not see any decline from 2024 Joe Biden to 2021 Joe Biden?
Not when I said that. You know, the thing is, he was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences is not praise.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Look, the question is, what are we going to do now?
Okay.
All right, so now that's the 1-minute clip that went viral yesterday, and a lot of people saw it, or maybe you're just seeing it for the first time. There's actually more to this that we're going to watch because it doesn't get any better for her when she effectively changes the subject and says, no, 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 the important thing is what are we going to do next? All right, we're going to watch that, but I do want to watch a couple of little bits here real fast in this first segment. By the way, I just want to say, I don't know what you're doing with your skincare regimen or whatever it is. Maybe it's the hair, but Zach Galifianakis, you look great. Is that how you pronounce his name? I've never been able to pronounce his name, but this is Between Two Ferns, right? Is this a satire podcast? What's with the set here? It's Between Two Ferns, and they're obviously plastic. Look, there's a price tag on that one. All right. So we're going to watch this together, and I got to ask, does she know there's a camera? Like when she walked in there and said, oh, it's a podcast. I listen to those from NPR, and she just thinks they're audio only. Did she not notice that there are cameras and lights? Because watch her here. She's acting like she's trying to like send this guy body signals like, you know, hey, dude, don't be asking me these questions.
That President Biden had a mental acuity. He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true.
And you think he was as sharp as you?
What is that? What was that? She started to laugh because she was confronted with her own lie. Does she not know we can see her? Senator, I know that you're used to like Native American technology, but I think even they have cameras at this point. That was offensive. Come on. It's a camera. We see you laughing. All right. And then watch after she gives another bull answer, watch her, you know, facial gesture to the interviewer, like, you know, take that. To stop pushing me on this. Okay. There's your answer. Move on. Watch.
I said I had not seen decline.
Did you see that? Did you see that? I said I had not seen decline. Let's leave it at that, pal. See, but of course, this guy is either brilliant or clueless, or maybe he's just an independent thinker and he doesn't do the typical network thing where you just go with it. Oh, okay. Well, we don't want to go there, right? What did Michael Stranahan do with the woman who had accused the MS-13 dude? Well, I'm not going to press you on that, certainly. I won't press you on the one issue that everybody cares about. So he ain't getting it. He's playing dumb, I think.
And I hadn't at that point.
You did not see any decline from 2024 Joe Biden to 2021 Joe Biden?
Not when I said that. You know, the thing is, look.
She's like, how do I get out of this? No one's ever challenged me on this. I've said my talking point. It's what my comms person said they'll all accept. No one's followed up. No one's ever followed up. And then and don't forget, Elizabeth Warren is one of the smartest of them all. They tell us that all the time. And so she's searching her brain. She's trying to come up with the only correct answer she can deliver. And somewhere in the back of her head, when everybody knew that Joe Biden couldn't be president for his first term, let alone for his second term, somewhere in there, somebody had said that, you know what, Joe Biden's actually pretty quick on his feet. But it got mangled in her cerebral cortex. Maybe she's been smoking the peace pipe too much and she's killed some of the gray matter. But Joe Biden being able to think on his feet turned into this.
He was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him. Live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences is not praise.
All right. Fair enough.
He can actually stand without assistance. And by the way, that wasn't always true either. All right, moving on. She says, what's important is what do we do next? All right, so this is her chance to pivot, to change the subject. Watch what happens. It doesn't get any better.
And what we're going to do now is we got 47 of us in the Senate. And we are pulling ourselves together because it increases our power. We don't have as much power as we want, but we don't have no power. And we got to use all of our tools in the toolbox to do as much as we humanly possibly can.
Mm.
This is now for all the marbles, Sam. And I get it. We
Wait,
could
no,
go
no,
back.
Last time was for all the marbles, I thought.
I get it.
In 2020, it was the soul of the nation.
I understand.
How many times is it going to be for all the marbles? Can we just have a normal election?
I'd love that.
How many marbles are there?
We got a guy right now who is saying that he's flirting with not obeying lawful court orders. But what he's doing is like a whole nother level of threat to the survival of our democracy and
understand.
more of the
I'm not trying to
importantly,
make light of that.
I know you're not. And what I'm trying to do is say, God dang, we can spend our time looking backwards and
Okay.
saying, you know what parts we didn't
Fine.
get right, fine. And I'll stipulate, you can have it. But the question is, what are we going to do now? What tools have we got? How much can we herd our Democrats together? And how much can we get real power in this moment by getting people across the country to weigh in on their Social Security cuts, weigh in on the Department of Education cuts, weigh in on the healthcare cuts?
Damn, that was some pretty Kamala-esque word salad at the end there. Talk easy, Sam Fragoso. Good for him, honestly. I mean, you know, he acquiesced there, but he pushed a bit and he got something out of her. She won't go on a podcast like this because it would be unrelenting and nothing but questions like that. But I do love this whole idea. It's like, you know, but Trump's a fascist. Oh, there's a new thing. Oh, I hadn't heard that before. That'll work. You should have used that during the campaign. Oh, that's right, you did. So she finally says, you know, because he's like, oh, please, it's been for all the marbles for every election of my lifetime, which is true. That's what they always say. If we lose this could be the last election of our lifetime. You know, remember that in 2024, this is the last free election we'll ever have. He won, and all they're doing is talking about the next election. They're all vying and jockeying to run in the next election, which I thought wasn't going to happen if Trump won the last one. But see, Elizabeth Warren misses the biggest point of all because she keeps saying, oh, none of that's the point. We can look in the rearview mirror, but none of that's the point. Because right now I'm telling you A, B, and C, and you have to do what I think we should do about A, B, and C. Otherwise, D, E, and F is going to happen. But here's what she doesn't get. And here's not what any of the other Democrats get who won't confront this. And here's what all the media people and the teleprompter readers won't get if they don't confront it. You won't admit you lied. You won't admit you lied about the single most important issue of 2024. I mean, you also lied about the most important issue of 2020 when it came to COVID, but you all lied about Biden's health. And you want us to just forget that. You won't even admit that you lied. And you want it to all go away and then say, trust me now on A, B, and C and my concerns about D, E, and F. And I'm like, dude, you lied about the big kahuna. You confront that. You face that. You fix that. And maybe I'll listen to you about A, B, and C. A couple of other very interesting things about this clip that you just watched. It was posted by none other than, oh, you can't make this up, our buddy Jake Tapper, the only serious journalist in town. Interesting moment between Senator Warren and Sam Fragoso on Talk Easy Pod regarding President Biden. Really, that's all you got to say, Jake? Interesting? Well, it is interesting. The fact that they didn't take the price tag off of the fake palm, I guess, is interesting. The content of the conversation, it's not interesting. It's enraging. What network does Jake Tapper work for again? I'm trying to remember. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, that's right. It's CNN. Okay, so you just saw this clip. You just saw this exchange between Sam Fragoso and Elizabeth Warren about the lies regarding Joe Biden's health, right? You just saw it. And you just saw that it was tweeted out to the world on X by Jake Tapper of CNN, right? You see that too, right? Okay. Here's CNN. The video on top, this is put together by our friend. This is Maze, right? Is this Maze?
Yep.
Yeah, good job, Maze Moore. Subscribe to his channel on X. The top clip is Caitlin Collins on Jake Tapper's CNN the day before the CNN debate between Biden and Trump.
President Biden has spent days locked in intense preparation, surrounded by his closest advisors at Camp David. And our sources are telling us tonight that full mock debates are underway at the podium, under the lights. He's even watching tape to know exactly what he's going to see when he steps up to that lectern. His team shot a video during a walkthrough of the CNN studio. And as I reported while covering him at the White House, when Biden prepares, he does so incredibly intensively.
So just how worried were Biden aides before the former president's disastrous debate last summer? According to Ron Klain, his chief of staff, his concerns could not be overstated. At his first meeting with Biden for debate prep, quote, Klain was startled. He'd never seen Biden so exhausted and so out of it. Biden was unaware of what was happening in his own campaign. Halfway through the session, the president excused himself and went off to sit by the pool. Part about the pool, he went off, this is in the middle of debate prep, went off to the pool and he took a nap.
Also CNN, by the way. So that clip of Caitlin Collins the day before the debate, where she says that her sources tell her that the president had engaged in intense debate coverage, and boy, he's really going at it and he's all over and he's doing it. And now it turns out he was taking naps by the pool. So here's what real journalists do, Caitlin. And I know that you used to be a young, scrappy journalist when you worked for the Daily Caller, when Tucker Carlson gave you your first big break. And now you work for a network that calls Tucker Carlson the worst possible things you can call anybody. You are quite the ungrateful person, aren't you? But Caitlin, if you can just put your young, budding journalist hat back on, it wasn't that long ago. Listen to me, please. Your sources burned you. Your sources lied to you. Your sources made you look like a lying propagandist hack. And here's what we do in journalism. When a source tells us something that is obviously a lie, you go back on your exact same platform at the exact same time that you repeated that lie from your source, and you say, listen, this is what I said in June about Biden's debate prep. And my sources told me that, and my sources lied to me. And here's who my sources are. This is their name. This is this source. This is this source. This is what they were doing at the time. But you won't do that, will you? Because you want to keep your sources because they might work for the next president, or maybe they work for a senator right now. Maybe they work for Obama right now, and you want to get more little juicy tidbits. Of course, the next juicy tidbits you get could be lies too, but you don't care about that either, do you? You just want to be able to sit up there with your teleprompter and your hairdo and say, my sources tell me, because she's got sources. No, she's got people who feed her lies knowing that she'll repeat them. What you do is you say, these were my sources. They were wrong. I will never trust them again. And I apologize to you, my viewer. I'll be better next time. That ain't going to happen. That ain't going to happen at all. Do you know the other reason why she doesn't want to reveal her sources? Because when we find out who they are, we'll realize that they're a joke and that she should have never trusted them in the first place. If, big if, there are sources. I mean, it could have been Hunter. Let's face it. But I shouldn't pile on Caitlin Collins. She and her network have become, well, literally a joke. Babylon Bee today. CNN says behind closed doors, Pope is still focused, sharp, and energetic. And preparing for the upcoming Pentecost Mass. I know I've been hard on CNN, but I'm not going to stop. CNN's got this guy again, the Irish radical who likes to cover far-right extremism in America because there's no extremism for him to cover back in Ireland. Now he's interviewing conservative reporters who have gotten a chance to get into the press briefing room and ask questions. And he made a big mistake. He found Natalie Winters of War Room and asked her a question that she was ready for.
To the people, and I'm sure you see this online every single day, who say you don't deserve to be here because you're not a real journalist. What's your response to them?
Well, I'm pretty sure the group of people in there spent, 4 years covering for someone who was essentially dead, and that's being charitable in my description of him, a president by the name of Joe Biden. So to all those people who are apoplectic over having new media voices, you guys failed, and that's why we're here.
The chair of the White House
That's dead on right. And that's that. I love that CNN is now put themselves in a position to judge who's an appropriate, truthful, responsible, professional journalist. And they've decided that Natalie Winters or maybe our team from Town Hall, who are at the White House on a regular basis, or the team from Daily Signal, or any other of the new upstart conservative media outlets, they're not real journalists. But CNN, as we've just laid out for you, they're the real journalist, especially when it comes to covering Joe Biden's health in the last election. Why would you trust any of the reporters that covered the Biden White House? In fact, every network should have cleaned house and started with fresh new people. That was a great moment from Natalie Winters. I only have one other suggestion. It would have been great if right after he asked the question, you said, okay, I'll answer, but hey, the eyes are up here, pal. The eyes are up here. I think that'd been great. That's just me talking, though. Hey, Kevin, we're not done with CNN, are we?
No, sir.
Let's go more CNN. Last night, Abby Phillips had her regular news night roundtable, and the conversation turned to America's lack of trust in our media. And again, I don't know why CNN would host this conversation, because it ain't going to end well for them. But they brought on this guy. He's a Jeff Jarvis. He is he's a journalism professor. So understand that almost all the journalists that you read right now, Washington Post, New York Times, or you see on television, they probably went through his classroom or went through a program that he designed and is replicated at the top journalism schools in America: Northwestern, Syracuse, USC, what have you. So they brought him on to talk about why Americans don't trust journalists anymore. They brought on the guy who's created the very journalists who have lost that trust. So yeah, okay, I'm interested to hear his opinion. And then we'll hear Scott Jennings' opinion.
The problem is that the right wing, hello, Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think, quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so they've created a situation where...
You've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale, especially during
you're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
People back in those days trusted the media, did they not?
No, they just couldn't be heard because there was no two-way. Now we have the internet.
Look at the Gallup polling. It was here, and now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling about trust in media, and now, as in recent years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle. I mean, it's not.
You think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely.
But my point is this: if you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you. And it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people. And the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is what you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that you had Trump wants. Trump tries to devalue media. Why should we value his freak show there? Let's leave it to the freaks.
I think calling them freaks.
I don't think there's any disagreement on that, by the way.
I mean, he called these new media sources the freak show. They're not freaks. They have audiences.
Some of them are.
They have audiences, and there's a reason that they're thriving is because the people are starved for information that they think they can trust. They're not freaks. They're filling a need in this country, in my opinion.
All right. That was fantastic. And we're going to break it down because there's three distinct segments there that I want to comment on. But what you just saw there, you probably smelled it through your viewing screen here. That was the elitism. That was the elitism of the hierarchy of the credentialed class in America that is best represented by journalists in Washington, D.C. and Manhattan. At every turn, this guy who if you ask him, he'll tell you over drinks that he's smarter, in his opinion, than 99.9% of the rest of this country is completely clueless about what's going on with that 99.9% of this country. Absolutely clueless. He came close, as Scott Jennings just said. But let's break this down and give a little analysis here, because I know that you love the media that's smart. I know that you love a media that's truthful and honest and real and is actually producing a product that actually feeds what you're craving for, which is information, context, and analysis. I know that because you're here. In fact, give us a thumbs up while you're here right now, real fast, because you've been watching us for a while, and I know that you're entertained. All right, so let's break this down a bit, shall we? Because this deserves a little bit of a Larry, what do we call it? The Larry treatment?
The problem is that the right wing, hello, Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think.
The right wing has taken an advantage of the fact that the left-wing media has been caught in lies. We're taking advantage of the fact that you guys blew the biggest stories of the last 10 years. We're taking advantage of the fact that you got caught with your pants down lying about Russian collusion because your anonymous sources promised you it was real and it wasn't. And so you made it up because you didn't care, because all you focused on was destroying Trump. The right wing in this country is taking advantage of the fact that we have a mind of our own and we're not going to march like lemmings and vote for you, who you tell us to vote for, and you hate us for that. That's who the right wing is taking advantage of. Well, shame on us.
Quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so they've created a situation where...
You've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale, especially during
you're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
People back in those days trusted the media, didn't they?
No, they just couldn't be heard.
Now, that's fascinating insight, because he's a little bit correct there. Walter Cronkite would say that's the way it is. And most Americans did know that it wasn't the way it was because, well, as you know, Walter Cronkite was a screaming liberal Democrat. And he decided to lie about the Vietnam War and many other things going on in the country because he lived in Manhattan and wanted to be a part of the cool kids club. He's revealing quite a bit there. He's also revealing the idea that there's this myth of objectivity, that there's no such thing as objectivity, which I would agree with, actually. But that's actually not his full takeaway here. He's suggesting that the internet has changed things now. No, this has been true no matter what the medium is. The internet's changed one thing, and we'll get to that in a second. But the fact that reporters can use the cloak of objectivity to pretend like they don't have a dog in the fight, and yet they're actually pushing their political bias overtly or covertly through whether it's a newspaper or a radio or a television or a cable show or an internet show, that doesn't change whatever medium is being used. It's still the same old fraudulent behavior. Just ask Jake Tapper. He's got an office right down the hall from you there. But watch, there's more.
Because there was no two-way. Now we have the internet.
Look at the Gallup polling. It was here. And now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling about trust in media. And now, as in recent years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle. I mean, it's not.
You think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely.
That is an amazing moment when Abby Phillips calls out her colleague, Scott Jennings, for saying this is driven by the rhetoric on your side. Because here's what she's saying. Because you see through the lies. Because they get fact-checked and their lies are proven, because you know that they're lying to you, and now suddenly you call them out on it, and you tell the world that I'm not going to trust you anymore because CNN is full of shit, then it's your fault. It's your fault for realizing the facts. It's your fault for realizing the truth of the matter. You're the problem. Shut up and just watch our ads so we can get paid more money, damn it. And then they transition to another part of the conversation.
The point is this. If you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you, and it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people, and the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is...
Thank you very much. And by the way, let's think about this for a minute. Fox News Channel. You may have mixed feelings about Fox News Channel. I have mixed feelings about Fox News Channel. But let's point out the fact that the Fox News Channel, when it originated in the early to mid 90s, and it was created by Roger Ailes, it had one basic idea. There's a huge percentage of Americans who get their news in a way that is offensive to them because stories that matter to them are ignored or they're lied about. Their elected officials are maligned and lied about, and they don't have equal time. This is right after Rush Limbaugh began his talk radio show, and he became a huge sensation because finally people said, oh, this guy is talking about stories and talking about in a way that relates better to me and doesn't offend me and treat me like an idiot. So Fox News starts, and they laughed at Fox News. Oh, they mocked Fox News. They made fun of Fox News. And now Fox News is dominant. They've been dominant for over 20 years. They've been dominant. They have absolutely blistered in prime time, regular fun daytime mornings, special events. Fox News dominates. Now, these people are in a business. CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, all of them. It's a business. Their business is to get ratings and to put on a show that attracts viewers who will then be appealing to the advertisers. And it's been almost 30 years since Fox News has dominated. And not once have any of those businesses said, hey, maybe they've got something over there. Maybe we should have one show, two shows, maybe a weekend show. Maybe we hire one person to host a show that appeals to that audience. And yet they never have. You watch CBS, NBC, ABC, they do their Sunday shows, right? This is a good gig to be a contributor on ABC News or NBC News. It's a great gig, man. You get paid a salary. You show up maybe on a special election night coverage or debate night coverage and do a primetime hit. And you show up like 2 Sundays a week, and it's good money, man. Trust me, everybody in town wants that gig. And they have the round table. It's like, you've heard the news, you've heard the interviews, and now our round panel discussion of experts. And those people, some of them are on the payroll. And they've got a couple of Democrats, and they've got usually one Republican. They've got several Democrats. Maybe they'll have one Republican. They'll have 10 Democrats. And if you're lucky, they'll have one Republican. But here's the thing about that Republican, if they're on the payroll, that paid Republican for those networks on that round table hates Trump. The one Republican they'll hire is going to be Chris Christie or Bill Kristol or Steve Hayes or Anna Navarro. Hey, we have our Republican. What do you want from us? That's equal time. It's been 10 years since Donald Trump went down the golden escalator, and these corporate geniuses still don't pay one person to represent the majority of Americans in this country, who also happens to represent the viewpoint of the President of the United States. They call themselves a serious political analyst show, and yet there's no one there on the payroll who represents the President and the majority of Americans. And after all this time, they still, you can't be stupid. You can't possibly be stupid in corporate media and last this long. This has to be a willful decision. They're not like, oh, geez, it never occurred to us. No. They willfully do this. They go out of their way. In fact, Jennings on CNN is the unicorn, and it's a new development. And let me tell you something. At CNN, they are freaking out about him. All right, one more.
What you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that Trump wants.
All right, I'll leave it there. What is this guy in his 70s? Guy's in his 70s. Got white hair. He's got a goatee with no mustache. And he's wearing Dumbledore glasses. And he's screaming at me about a freak show. This guy's calling somebody else a freak. But that's CNN. That's CNN for you. Not only are they calling their media colleagues the freak show, but he's also calling their viewers freaks too. But that's par for the course for CNN. I mean, one other quick Jennings exchange here, which I loved, which is kind of tangentially related about the insular world that the left protects themselves in. The reason why you don't see a Republican, a pro-Trump Republican on any of those panel shows is because the producers and the network executives, they all live in Manhattan. They all want to go to the nice dinner parties in the Hamptons. They all have very rich friends who are all very liberal, and they don't want to show up and say, "Ew, why do you have that guy on your show?" And here's a perfect example of it. A conversation about how Bill Maher had dinner with Donald Trump and actually spoke rather positively about it. Larry David wrote a column in the New York Times called "My Dinner with Adolf." Watch the conversation.
And the message of this is not to, because Bill Maher, first of all, I totally agree. He's totally in the right to do it. And I loved his monologue. Even though I disagree with most everything he believes politically, he was right to do this and he was right to speak out about it. But this isn't about that dinner. It's about the next one, because this is the modern left. It's an attempt always to intimidate people into not ever doing it again. It's to silence yourselves, or we'll do it for you. That's the purpose of this op-ed, so that the next comedian or the next person on the American left chooses not to speak to Donald Trump. This is all an effort to get people not to do what you just said, which is to talk to each other and our political leaders.
That's 100% right. And I guarantee you, the person who runs CNN, the person who produces every show on CNN and every other television network that covers news and politics, they would much rather have dinner with Larry David than with Bill Maher. So there you have it. That's why we are where we are. And as my mentor and my friend, the dearly departed Andrew Breitbart, and that's his book, Righteous Indignation, as he famously said to the media, the American people don't hate you because you're biased. They hate you because you suck. All right, let's finish strong here, Kevin, shall we? We've got Randy Weingarten, baby. No doubt by now you've seen this moment from Fox News Channel yesterday when the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, had a, well, let's just say, interesting exchange with Martha McCallum. The short clip goes like this.
You have actually very difficult.
Martha, sweetheart, listen to me.
Please don't call me sweetheart.
It actually does. I'm sorry. My bad. It actually does.
Let me tell you something. I'm a married man. I am not married to Martha McCallum, but I am married to a very strong, opinionated blonde. And let me tell you something. When you get that face, you done stepped in it. When I don't know who Mr. McCallum is. I don't know who Martha, but let me tell you, when hubby was watching this and saw that face, he had some PTSD right there. He said, "Oh, no, not that face." Oh, can you believe she did that? Sweetheart? Now, viewers of this channel, this program, will not be surprised that Randy Weingarten behaved that way. This is your typical Randy Weingarten moment.
Big businesses were hurting, and we helped them, and it didn't go to the Supreme Court to challenge it. All of a sudden, when it's about our students, they challenge it. The corporations challenge it. The student loan lenders challenge it. That is not right. That is not fair. And that is what we are fighting as well when we say, cancel student debt.
Wow, that's Randy Weingarten. And may I just say, before we go into the longer version of this interview, despite what I'm about to say to you, Ms. Weingarten, I really did love your scene in the opening of Fellowship of the Ring. You were fantastic. All right, so this now is Randy Weingarten on her best behavior with my just reining it. She's not hopping mad. She's not screaming, but she can't hold it in. I mean, I don't know if she didn't have enough Ritalin or what have you, but let's watch the whole thing because there's a lot in here that goes well beyond just Randy calling Martha McCallum sweetheart.
About protecting books of all kinds in Florida and other places across the board. So do you think twice when you listen to some of these examples of what's being read to 4 to 6-year-olds?
Mm-hmm. So, Martha, first off, thank you for having me on. And I hope that we get to all the other issues in terms of education. But I would say that this is a hard case because parents, of course, have rights in terms of educating their kids, and schools have to be communities. And the moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning.
All right, let me just pause there. If you're not up to speed on the issue, this was a Supreme Court case that was heard yesterday. It comes out of Montgomery County, Maryland, which is right on the border of Washington, D.C., one of the most liberal areas on the planet. I used to live there when I worked in Washington, D.C. on a daily basis. A very liberal Democrat dominated. Jamie Raskin is the congressman from there, okay? You know what I'm talking about. Their school board decided that they would no longer allow parents to opt their children out of any curriculum that involved topics of a sexual nature. And the insidious thing is, it wasn't just, health, sex ed class. Like, they would have books for kindergartners that had same-sex relationships in reading class or English class. And of course, up until now, if the school decided to use material like that, because you can teach a kid to read without having the prince fall in love with the knight, right? But if you go out of your way and that's the book you choose to teach people, phonics, then parents have the right to opt their children out of that because there are certain complex issues of sexuality and relationships that many parents would rather introduce to their children on their own and through the context of their own values as well as their own religious faith. Well, the Montgomery County Board of Education said, no, go yourselves with that. We know better about how to teach your kids. No more opt-out. Now, you just heard Randy Weingarten give you a really polished and rehearsed and market-tested answer, which is, well, if it's reached this point, there's already a failure somewhere along the line. Of course, parents have rights. So this is a really difficult case. Stop right there. If, of course, parents have rights, then this is a very simple case. There's nothing difficult about it at all. Of course, parents have rights, full stop. Parents have a right to determine whether sensitive, especially sexual issues, are discussed outside of their consent and outside of the parameters of their values. These are 5-year-olds. All right, so that's the topic at hand. Here goes Randy Weingarten trying to play to the Fox News audience and sound reasonable. But boy, does she reveal herself and the left pretty quickly. All right, take it away. What is she again? The president of the American Federation of Groomers? Is it? No, it's teachers. I'm sorry.
And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced. But, once you get a case like this, where, parents are uncomfortable about what is being read to their kids in a classroom, this is something that has to be dealt with in a local level, not in the Supreme Court. And so parents have rights, and they should have rights in terms of what is being taught in classrooms. And, and we're going to have to actually deal with how we ensure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment, and that we see differences and we accept differences, whether those differences are religious or whether those differences are sexual, and that we actually make sure that the community, is there as a community. So,
all right. So first of all, 5-year-olds don't have sexual differences because 5-year-olds are not sexual beings. So it freaks me out to hear somebody even use that term in this context. Okay. Number one. Number two, this should be settled on a local level. Well, okay, so I do a morning radio show in Washington, D.C. I've done so over a dozen years. I've covered this story. It's right in my backyard. This was handled at a local level. Parents spoke out. They showed up. They had their voices heard. They said, no, we don't want this. They were told to shut up and get out of the room. In fact, the vote was done without any public in the room at the time of the vote. Do you know why the Montgomery County public school system decided to end the parents' opt-out? Do you know why? Parents had the right to opt their children out and say, okay, if you're going to teach that, my kid has a right to leave the room and you got to deal with him in another room. The reason why they ended the opt-out was because so many parents were opting their children out. It was chaos. Over half the classroom would have to leave. And then they had to have another teacher take care of the kids who were opting out into another classroom. And it became mayhem for the school system. And so the school system has a choice. It's like, all right, listen, we got this book. Half the kids are opting out. It's becoming chaos. So maybe we should pick a different book. Maybe we shouldn't use this book. Oh, now that would be a smart and reasonable thing. Wouldn't it, Randy? Is that the right way you handle it on a local level? Yeah, I would think so too. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. The teachers union, Randy, your pals, and the Montgomery County Board of Education decided, oh, yeah, this is a problem. This is untenable. We can't have this. So we're ending the opt-out. We're not going to force the kids to sit there against their parents' wishes because we know better how to raise these children than these parents do. And by the way, the reason why it ended up in the Supreme Court is because when asked to explain their position, these elected officials said, wow, these people are bringing their religion to the table. They're motivated. They don't want this book because of their religious faith. Some are Muslim, some are Christian, some are Orthodox Jewish, and they can't have that. They literally cited their religious beliefs as the reason why they were discriminating against them. It is going to go down in a blaze of glory. But I love watching Randy Weingarten attempt to defend this crap.
Though that there's an appropriate age to have a discussion. These are 4 to 6-year-olds and they're being read. And this is out loud in the classroom, not just, oh, this is a book on the shelf in the library. If there's a particular child that, you might want to read this with, but, just as an example, my pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel. And that's okay because they're my words. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of, just as one example here.
Let me put it this way.
Go ahead,
Martha, and I think that this will be shocking to you. These would not be the books I would be reading as a classroom teacher to kids who are 4 to 6 years old.
Now, first of all, it should be pointed out that Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation for Teachers, making all these decisions about your children, she doesn't have any kids of her own. That said, Randy Weingarten just admitted that if she were a parent, she would like to opt out if her kid had to hear these, because she just said, with my judgment, based on my sensibilities, based on my values, as a teacher, I wouldn't read that book. Okay, so you're saying you would opt out from reading it. How about letting parents opt their children out from hearing it? But she can't connect those dots. She can't use logic in that way. She's a liberal.
Yeah. And I say this, I went through the New York City public school system. I was a teacher during when we had the big issue around Heather Has Two Mommies. And I think when you don't actually make sure that things are age appropriate and we don't actually have sufficient conversations with teachers and parents in terms of how we accept differences, then you have situations like this right now. Yeah. And so my concern about this case is that it is, that it could pit people against each other, when what we really need to be doing is we need to be making sure that every one of God's children is accepted in our classrooms. And whether that person is an evangelical Christian or whether that person is the daughter or the son of, gay parents, that is our obligation in schools. So, it's a failure of all of us that this case is in the Supreme Court right now.
No, it's not. It's a failure of the radical left. Do you notice the underlying message that she's sending there is that, well, this is about tolerance. This is about teaching children to be tolerant of people based on, whatever. So the underlying basis for her argument here and the left's argument is that parents are teaching their children to be bigots. And we, the public school teachers, we need to correct that. We need to fix that. Otherwise, they're all going to be a bunch of bigots. And there's this unspoken assumption that the left uses, personified by Randy Weingarten, that there's this ongoing intolerance and bigotry going on with 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. You know what they're intolerant of? Cooties. For God's sake, what are you seeing that I don't see? I've had little kids. I see little kids all the time. I've got an idea, Randy. I've got an idea, progressive left. I've got an idea, Montgomery County School Board. If a kid in a class is bullying another kid, discipline that kid. That's it. But don't indoctrinate everybody under the guise of, well, there's got to be bullying, so we better read these books that sure seem like you're trying to recruit people to an ideology or worse. What happened to the days of just isolating the kid who's misbehaving, calling in his parents, and dealing with it? Because here's the sad truth. There isn't any bullying going on. 5-year-olds are not attacking people over their sexuality because 5-year-olds don't see sexuality. Only creepy adults see that sort of thing in 5-year-olds. All right, I'll let this run through because I'm sorry, I could go out of my mind on a topic like this, but we have only so much time in our program.
So, it seems to me that the failure for all of us is what has happened to our kids in terms of their education. And I think what disturbs a lot of parents, religious background or non-religious background, is that they see this, woke ideology as, sort of the common phrase around all of this happening. And they're looking at the numbers and saying, why are you reading this book to my child when, first of all, I want to deal with this kind of discussion at home based on my own understanding of where my child might be, and B, the numbers are plummeting. Look at this. I mean, if this isn't a failure that needs to be so much more important than whether or not you're reading a book about your pronouns. This is the Maryland rankings. 4th graders, these same little kids who've had these books, fed to them at a very young age, their reading ranked in 2013, they were 2nd in the nation in Maryland. 2024, 20th. Math, 16th in the nation, plummeting down to 39th. So if I were a parent in this district, I would be saying, please, leave these books out of the picture. Teach my child to read and to do math, okay?
So, yes,
and let's focus on let's focus on why we're there.
Can we focus on that? Which is let's focus on the kind of things that we should be doing for kids. Because if you so this is not a district that I represent. It's represented ably by the NEA, and they've done a terrific job. But let's talk about the NAEP scores for a minute, not the Maryland Lake scores. Why don't you put up the
you have, I think, about
NAEP
18,000 teachers in the Maryland district at large. So.
No. But these are, so let's talk about the NAEP scores, for example, in Florida, which is a lot of people look at Florida and say that is the king, that is the mother of all mothers of school choice. Their NAEP scores are the lowest. They really plummeted in the same way. Let's look at the NAEP scores in Massachusetts, which some people would say, probably on your, in your on your network, that those, that the Massachusetts scores or the Massachusetts schools are very much embedded in equality and diversity. So let's look at what happens in Massachusetts that really works and what happens in Florida that doesn't work. What happens in Massachusetts that works is that there is far more funding and there is a real culture of a safe and welcoming school. And what we need to do is we need to actually do more of that.
So you're saying that because if we can find other areas around the country where the proficiency levels are also abysmal and should be embarrassing to any education organization, that we can start to make assessments and say that, it's because of choice or it's because of money. We know that money does not equate a better outcome, because in Newark, New Jersey, you have a per student, per capita expenditure that is one of the highest in the country. And you have very difficult. outcome.
Martha, sweetheart, listen to me.
Please don't call me
It actually
sweetheart.
does. I'm sorry. My bad. It actually does matter. And in fact, some of the most some of the conservative folks who used to say that money doesn't matter actually have changed their mind. So the issue.
Well, they wanted to go to different programs and choice programs and be able to give it to parents who want to homeschool their kids and provide.
No. I'm talking about people who are actually been looking at these numbers.
Yeah, she should have quit it, sweetheart, because it didn't go any better than that. Incredibly important and complex issue. It is not. It is actually very simple. Other people think that they're better at raising your children than you are. Other people think that they're smarter at raising their children than you are. Other people think that you're a terrible parent because of your values and your principles. And so they want to undermine you and teach your kids what they think your kids should be learning. Not about math, not about reading, not about science. No, about, stuff that they have no business talking to your kids about. And you're on the right side of this issue. Stay on that side. And the right side of the issue is to not call a very accomplished professional woman that you're talking to sweetheart, ever. All right, guys, that was a bit of a marathon, but we had a blast. $10 super chat from Christian Ellithorpe. Thank you for the $10. Thanks for the sawbuck there, buddy. Is that a sawbuck, $10, or is $20 sawbuck? I forget now. I feel like Harry Anton. Hey, thanks for the sawbuck. And 2 bits. Did you notice Jake Tapper didn't just have an extra furrow brow, but also his hair looked even more alarmed today, kind of like Mount St. Helens hair. There was a volcanic thing, but I'm not allowed to make fun of anybody's hair. Trust me. I barely keep it looking good on this straight on shot. But yes, he definitely had the extra furrow brow, Christian. I do love it when he furrows his brow extra deep. He's got the crevices going on in there. It's really something special. He's our man. Yes, he is. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Oh, I'm sorry. We have another super chat. $2 from Deplorable Diva Haynes. Just saying, great White House premiere unit. Hey, thanks and fist bump to you, Deplorable Diva Haynes. Yeah, we had a blast yesterday. It was a busy day. It was a long day. But it was a lot of fun, especially fun to hang out in our room. We had it was my buddy Chris DeGaulle from Salem Radio Network, who is literally Chris is the best man at my wedding. He's my best friend. It was great to see Chris in town. Vince Colonnese, my friend from my radio station, who now does the Dan Bongino show. He was sitting right next to me. Rita Cosby is an old friend of mine. You remember her from Fox News back in the day. She now does a radio show on WABC in New York. Look at I'm like showing where they were sitting in the room. Stacey Washington on Sirius XM, who we go back to the Breitbart days. She used to be a host on my live stream radio show at Breitbart back in 2009, I want to say. And now she's on Sirius XM. It was a great room we were in. Then the other room was Ben Ferguson, who does The Verdict. Matt Walsh was over there. Tim Pool. I know all these guys. Tim Pool's the only guy I don't know. Actually, I've never met Tim Pool. But it was great to see Matt again. Matt was his bubbly, effervescent self. He gave me one of these. Larry, good to see you again. That's about it. That's about all you can get. If you can get the mustache and beard to move a little bit, you know you've gotten a smile. So that was good. And Ben Ferguson came in, gave me a hug, and squeezed my butt. Have I said too much?
Wow. That's great.
That was a little vivid, wasn't it? He does. Ben likes my butt. Just mine. Not butt in general, just mine.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.